Hi, this is Winner, and welcome to Winscope Podcast. So, the topic which I want to discuss today was my main theme last month in my most recent trip, which was to China. Now, this was my only second time so far in China, and I continue to be impressed with a lot of things that I saw. Before, most of the things that I knew about China was mainly through movies or YouTube videos. But having been to the country, I have to say that those things really don't do the country justice. Even though I've only mainly been to just the big cities and the industrial areas, what I've experienced so far is that the country in general is actually very clean and modern. Cashless society is definitely a thing. It's already been implemented. Most things are digitalized. 99% of the bikes that I saw, roaming around the cities are now e-bikes. And most of all, the people have been very, very kind and respectful, which makes it a little bit more difficult during work when sometimes you have to disagree with them or point out things to them that are incorrect. And several times I feel like it's especially more difficult to upset them. However, in order to do my job, sometimes it's necessary that I go into difficult conversations or go into things that I know can potentially upset people, which is the topic that I want to discuss today. You see, nowadays, I notice that the trend of the modern world, the general direction seems to be that we avoid at all costs to upset or offend each other. It's the general trend nowadays to take the path of least resistance to avoid having difficult conversations or disagreeing with each other to keep everybody happy. Now, on the surface, it seems like that's the right thing to do. Like we're being selfless, like we're doing this for the greater good. But if you look carefully at the root of this, we would quickly realize that it can actually be a selfish thing, that many times it's simply for our own gain. We want to make sure that people like us. We don't want to get excluded from our social groups, or in today's term, we don't want to get canceled. Now, if we try to understand this based on what we know about human nature, we'd find that we all inherently have this fear of upsetting people in general, regardless of whether we are in the right or the wrong. Because humans are social creatures. You see, we rely on each other quite a lot, not only to accomplish things, but to ensure our place within a social hierarchy, which affects how well we navigate our lives in the workplace and how much we derive satisfactions from everyday social interactions. So it is, in fact, an evolutionary trait if we look at human history, because being left out of a social group, in the context of surviving in the wild, could very negatively impact your chance of survival, which explains a lot about things like having social anxieties or how we can readily enter fight or flight mode when entering difficult social situations. Because doing or saying anything that could upset people carries a high risk linked to our potential well-being. Now, having said that, we are no longer in 10,000 BC. The cost of upsetting people now is not the same as thousands of years ago. In fact, what many fail to realize is that it can actually become the opposite. The cost of not saying what you think or what you feel or what you know can end up becoming costly in the long term. It is actually a very short-term strategy to try to keep people happy at the expense of speaking the truth. So you need to learn how to upset people from time to time. And in this episode, I want to talk about how you need to learn to upset people sometimes. Getting right into it, the number one reason why you need to learn to upset people is because it allows you to learn more about yourself. There is no guarantee that everyone will agree with what you say, but if you force yourself often enough to speak your mind, you will actually learn more and more about who you are. Every time you speak your mind, you will be forced to do some self-reflection to communicate what you know, what you think, and how you feel. Because if you always go with the flow, always agreeing with people, making sure that there's nobody upset, these things that you think, you feel, will always get suppressed. Communicating what you know, what you think, and how you feel are opportunities to explore who you are as a person. And this is especially important for young people. Speaking your mind, whether objectively it is right or wrong, is a crucial part of the process of discovering who you are and your purpose in life. And sure, your thoughts might be incomplete or even wrong, but you will allow yourself to learn. And you need to practice this as early as possible. Otherwise, it will become increasingly difficult as you grow up, and you will struggle to communicate when people ask you what you think because you're just so out of touch with how you actually feel or what you actually know. Now, the second reason why you need to learn to upset people, and this one goes hand in hand with the first one, is that it allows other people to learn about who you are as a person. People like to generally complain about how they're not given enough opportunities. However, opportunities are not going to magically fall on your laps by being passive. It involves taking some risks, and those risks are the risk of upsetting people. When you speak your mind and risk upsetting some people, at the same time that you may be driving some people away, you are also simultaneously attracting other people to you. It works like a filter, and over time, this increases your chances of meeting new people and discovering new opportunities because people now have a clear idea of your character, your attitude, and your mindset. Not to mention the knowledge and information that you carry. You will be promoting for more dynamic in your life, which is always better than being stagnant, especially when you are still young. Now, the third reason why you need to learn to upset people is because it is necessary to do your job well, regardless of what line of work you are in. People always say that they want objective facts and information. However, what many people don't realize is that those objective facts and information are often accompanied with the risk of being offended. Because taking in new information sometimes require admitting that you don't know, or even admitting that what you know is wrong. And it has a direct impact to their ego. When I carry out my role as a process safety manager, sometimes I have to point out things that people are comfortable with that are actually unsafe. And sometimes I need to provide them with technical information to explain and correct some of their approaches. And all of those carry the risk of upsetting them. But if I avoid doing them, then I'm not doing my job. And from what I've learned so far in my experience from my career, whatever upset that you may cause to people from doing your job, in the long term, people will generally always appreciate it, and there is a perceived value in that, regardless of what line of work you are in. It is sometimes very difficult for me as well to go into conversations that I know will upset people, even when I learn to handle them better, but it is a skill that I need to develop in order to grow in my career, which brings me to the final point. The fourth and final reason why you need to learn to upset people is because it's required to grow in your career. When you think about it, learning to upset people is actually a part of people management skill, which is a very valuable soft skill. Navigating around people's emotions and ego in your communication is a tricky thing. It's a tricky skill that few people learn how to master. And you may have a perceived notion that this is somehow a skill only for politicians or something similar, but this is a skill that will be required more and more as you move up in your career. Because whatever titles that you take in all of your potential promotions, you will have to deal with more and more people. And there will be more and more times where you will have to potentially end up upsetting people, in your communications. Whether those people are your peers, your counterparts, or especially your direct reports, it is a skill that sets you apart from all others who may carry the same knowledge and experience. No matter how much you think it is not relevant to you, it is a skill that you will sooner or later be forced to learn. So that's it, folks. Those are the 4 reasons that I want to talk about today why you need to learn to upset people from time to time. And before I end this episode, I just want to say that this isn't about going out of your way every time to make sure that you upset people. This is just about recognizing how upsetting people may be necessary when you go through life, and especially in your career. But even when you have to upset people, you can still be polite and respectful. And there is a fine line between being honest and being an a-hole. So that's been it for today's episode, and I'll see you in the next one.